Another year, another question mark for the New York Giants offensive line. I've got that plus all the latest from day one of training camp. That's coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code Locked On NFL to get $20 off your first order. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Terms apply. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, a credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI. Find my written work over on New York Giants on SI.com. And as always, welcome on in to my Blue Crew community members, to my everydayers, to my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you for spending part of your day with us here at the Locked On Giants podcast. It is appreciated. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please consider subscribing to the channel and clicking the little notification bell so that you get notified every time I post a new video. And if you wouldn't mind, give this video a thumbs up. It all helps the cause. And on today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast, another year, another question mark for the New York Giants offensive line. We're going to talk about Evan Neal and his future, and basically the Giants non-committal to the 7th overall draft pick from a couple of years ago. So we're going to discuss that. We're going to talk about the first day of practice, and how that kind of unfolded a little bit different than what we saw last year. And it's a good type of different, and I'll explain why that is. And then in segment 3, I've got some takeaways for you from the practice. So that's our agenda for today. Again, thank you for tuning in. And let's kick things off. Now, one of the big question marks all year, all offseason long, has been the Giants offensive line, and specifically right tackle Evan Neal. Would he be ready to start training camp? If he is ready to start training camp, what kind of, how long of a leash does he have? Folks, we got our answer yesterday. We know that Evan Neal is not ready to start training camp almost 9 months after season-ending ankle surgery last year. And, just a couple of thoughts here on this thing. Number one, Joe Schoen, Brian Daboll, who did a joint press conference today, were asked about, the length of the recovery period. And they give you the standard line. They say every injury is different. Everybody's different. Folks, I'm not a doctor, okay? But I do know that you kind of get out of what you put into your rehab if you're rehabbing from something. You look at Daniel Jones, who tore his ACL, and that guy came at it and just, he got himself ready for the start of training camp. No limitations. You look at Evan Neal, about the same recovery time, and he's not ready. And just in listening to Daboll and Schoen speak today, and how they really didn't want to commit to saying, yep, when he's healthy, he's going to be our starting right tackle. Unlike what they did with Daniel Jones, where, they said when he's healthy, he's going to be our starting quarterback. Daboll and Schoen wouldn't commit. So reading between the lines, and I realize this is a little, dangerous to do, but reading between the lines, I get the impression that they're not very happy with Evan Neal, with, how his rehab has gone, what he's put into it, because, neither Daboll or Schoen would basically say, yeah, he's going to be our starting, right tackle. Their response was, well, let's get him healthy first and then we'll see. Now, here's the other thing that kind of, triggered to me that maybe they might be moving on from Evan Neal at right tackle. I was curious to see who they were going to plug in at right tackle for the first practice, because that, I think, would have told us how close Evan Neal was to coming back versus, is he not ready to come back? So my thinking was, if it was going to be Joshua Ezeudu or Matt Nelson, that would probably mean that Neal was a little closer to coming back. But if it was going to be Jermaine Illuminor, that probably meant that they would get ready to move on and just say, you know what, let's cut our losses. Let's just plug Illuminor in there and just get this offensive line, up to stuff so that we're not, playing around with different rotations and lineups going deep into training camp. Well, folks, they went with Jermaine Illuminor. And that right there told us that they're probably thinking about going with Jermaine Illuminor at right tackle for the start of the season. Now, that being said, guess who got hurt in the practice today? And I know I shouldn't laugh. I apologize for laughing. But sure enough, Jermaine Illuminor took a shot to the midsection. We think it's his ribs. The Giants have not confirmed what the injury is as I record this, but I had heard that it was the rib cage. Now, Jermaine Illuminor did walk off the field on his own power. He walked off with two trainers flanking him on either side, waved off a cart. So, he wanted to walk off. But, Murphy's Law struck again. The Giants moved Illuminor to right tackle where, quite honestly, I think he should have been all along. And then the injury bug bites. So I don't know if he has broken ribs. I don't know how long he's going to be out right now. When I get an update, for those of you who watch on YouTube, I'll put a video up, a quick, short, letting you guys know what's going on. Of course, I'll also tweet it out, put it on Instagram, put it on my Threads account, all my social media accounts that, you can check into that. But yeah, so here we are, the offensive line already making headlines for the wrong reasons. So with Illuminor sideline for the time being, the Giants plugged in Joshua Ezeudu at that right tackle spot over Matt Nelson. So I found that to be kind of interesting. It's clear to me that they want Ezeudu to develop into that swing tackle for them. And, I don't hate that move, to be honest with you, but, I've got to see more from Ezeudu. Right now, remember, for the next, few days up until Monday. Monday's the first padded practice. We're not seeing these guys in pads. So therefore, it's too early to judge the offensive line and say, oh, yeah, they're better, or oh, no, they're worse. But the whole thing with Evan Neal, the fact that the Giant, head coach and GM could not commit the way they committed to Daniel Jones when he was rehabbing and they didn't know, was he going to have a setback or not? That told you everything you needed to know about where they're going with Evan Neal. So now the next question is okay, well, what do they do with him if and when he's healthy? Do they move him to left guard? And left guard, by the way, was plugged in by Aaron Stinney, for those of you wondering. That all depends. If the Giants land up signing Greg Van Roten, and, as I record this, nothing doing there, I haven't heard anything about whether they're close. The last I heard, Van Roten was kind of weighing his options. So we'll see if, the Giants throw a little bit more money at him to get him to sign. But if they sign Van Roten and, Jermaine Illuminor's injury is not something that's going to keep him out a long period of time, that means Evan Neal is going to the bench. The 7th overall pick in the draft a couple of years ago is going to the bench. Let that sink in for a moment. All right. You can't hit on all of them. No GM hits on all his draft picks, but to blow a top 10 pick, ouch. That's just rough. No other way to put it. So we will see if Illuminor is back. Hopefully he is okay. He was so excited to get started as a Giant, and now this happened. So we'll see if he's okay. I'll, of course, keep you updated on all that stuff. But yeah, that's where we're at with this Giants offensive line that just seems to be cursed year after year after year with injuries and performance issues. All right, coming up next, the Giants practice. Little different from what I remember from last year. I'll tell you how, and I'll tell you why it's a good thing. Don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, did you know that you don't have to miss out on your chance to attend local sports events, concerts, shows, and more. Game Time has a wide inventory of tickets available at competitive prices for all your favorites. Plus, with Game Time, you get clear seat views, event cancellation protection, last minute money saving opportunities, and easy online ordering with no surprises. And if you find tickets elsewhere in the same section and row for less, Game Time will give you 110% of the difference. So go on and get the event tickets that you want. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Terms apply. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And all this week, if there is a Giant practice, there will be a Locked On Giants podcast. That includes on the weekends. Now, not this weekend, unfortunately, because Sunday, I'm not going to be able to make practice. It is my husband's birthday, and I really feel like I should spend the day with him. But that's okay. It's one practice. And I'll be back in time for Monday when the pads go on. But otherwise, I will have shows for you recapping Thursday's practice, Friday's practice, Saturday's a day off. So there will be no shortage of content here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And I hope you'll check it all out. You know, I'm still trying to get to 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. I can't have the Eagles and the Cowboys beating the Giants podcast. So please help us out here. Please, please, please. Okay. Now on this segment, how is the Giants practice different this year? And why is it a good thing? Now, let me take you back to last year and what we observed and why I kind of had a little problem with how the Giants ran training camp last year. Last year, the Giants came into the first few days of training camp, and I thought they took it a little too easy on the players. By that, I meant you didn't see a whole lot of 11 on 11. You saw a lot of 7 on 7. And, you know, you kind of saw that recurring theme throughout training camp. And it just seemed like the goal of head coach Brian Daboll was to keep everybody healthy, get everybody to the start line of the regular season and, you know, not have to deal with injuries. Well, you know what? That didn't work. We all know that when the Giants lined up week 1 against the Cowboys, initially they looked like, you know, maybe they would be okay. And then at the bottom just absolutely fell out. And the Giants looked terrible. And they never really recovered from that. And, you know, that was one of the biggest, you know, criticisms I had of how training camp was run last year. I thought it was a little too soft, you know, because they were a little too concerned about the injury history. Now, that being said, Daboll, when he was asked about it, he said, well, you know, sometimes it has to do with numbers. Maybe I don't have, you know, enough healthy bodies. To that, I say, okay, then you take the healthy bodies you do have and you give them a little extra reps if need be. It's not that hard, I don't think. So I never quite bought that excuse. I always thought that, you know, they were more concerned with getting everybody to the starting gate healthy. And, you know, look, they may not have had a lot of injuries in the preseason, but once the regular season started, we all know what happened with the injuries. And injuries are going to happen. You know, it doesn't matter. Preseason, regular season, training camp, OTAs, it doesn't matter. If something's meant to happen, it's going to happen. And there's not a darn thing you can do about it if you're a head coach, because football is a violent game. All right. So what have the Giants done differently in this training camp so far? Okay. One practice, granted. But the one practice that we saw today, there was a lot more 11 on 11. There was also no 7 on 7 plays, as I recall. All right. So kind of a reversal from what they did last year. And this was a theme that actually started back in the spring, where we saw more team drills than we did, you know, 7 on 7 or 9 on 7 or anything like that. And, you know, look, you got to build chemistry up. You got to get your guys, you know, to practice with one another, to get used to one another. Look, you got Daniel Jones, who has been cleared to do everything in camp. There's no limitations on Daniel Jones, although I think they're going to kind of ramp him up a little bit to full speed. So that being said, Daniel Jones did not get an opportunity to throw to his receivers in the spring. So what are you going to do? You're going to be soft and say, okay, you know what? We're not going to do any 11 on 11 and we'll just worry about, um, you know, we'll just worry about getting you to the starting gate. No, you got to get him some reps. You have to get the starting offensive line reps, the defensive line. Everybody's got to get their reps. You can't go easy on these guys. Now, that's not to say you overwork them, but you monitor that obviously, and they will, with the GPS. But interestingly, they kind of changed things up a little bit. If I remember correctly, last year, I don't think the Giants went every with a day off every third day like they're doing now. So it's 3 days of practice, day off, 3 days of practice, a day off. And Dable was asked about that during the opening press conference today, his joint press conference with Joe Shane. And he basically said, Aaron Wellman, who, hopefully is going to get this injury situation under control. That was a recommendation that, Aaron Wellman felt might help the team. So, it's a balance, obviously, trying to keep the team healthy, but also making sure that you get quality reps in. And, in retrospect, you go back to last year, then when the Giants had their joint practice against the Lions were, so much further ahead than the Giants at that time. And, right then and there, in retrospect, the Giants should have said, oh, wow, we need to pick up the pace a little bit more. And they didn't. And, we all know how the season unfolded. So we'll see how the Giants stack up against the Lions when they come in for the joint practices in a couple of weeks. But the bottom line is Dable recognized that you just can't be soft. You have to come at it. You have to, get quality reps in. It doesn't mean wear the guys down to the ground. Obviously, you monitor stuff, but what's your priority here? Getting to the starting gate healthy, or getting to the starting gate and being ready? That's where Dable, had to make a decision, and he obviously and correctly, in my opinion, chose the importance of being ready. And hopefully injuries don't pop up, but if they do, it's part of the game. I know they stink. I know a lot of you are like, this team's always getting injured. I get all that, but it's part of the game. And, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So that to me was probably the biggest change in terms of the difference between the opening of training camp this year versus last year. So we'll see if that continues. Obviously, we'll keep an eye on all that stuff and we'll see if that continues. But I applaud, the decision to, go in and jump in to the deep end a little quicker than they did last year. All right, coming up next, I have some takeaways from the practice, so please don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So go on and keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and as always, thank you for spending part of your day with me here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Committed to bringing you all that you need to know from training camp. And in this segment, I've got some, a few takeaways. Now, here's the thing. Let me just kind of set the stage for you for how I'm going to approach the takeaways. I'm not one that charts every single play in a practice because, sometimes it's hard to know, when you see a play, does, did the offense win or did the defense win? You don't really know unless you know the call. What I look for in the practice is I tend to look for, anything unique, like, for example, a personnel alignment. I look at, technique. For example, if a guy's running an end around, is he running a steep arc or is he running a narrow arc? So I look for little things like that, and just the fundamentals, if you will, because again, I don't know necessarily what the play is, and whether you can say that the offense won it or the defense won it. So that's what I try to do. Okay, that all being said, I know a lot of you asked me, how did Daniel Jones look? Daniel Jones, to me, was very spry in his movements. I mean, you could tell he was just absolutely tickled pink to be back out there, not have any limitations, to run around. He's still wearing the compression sleeve on his leg, but he was moving around. And if you didn't know that he had the torn ACL, last year, you'd say, man, he looks pretty good. He looks athletic, mobile, no problems. Was he a little rusty with his throws? Yes. Did he, were there some completions or not completions? Were there some throws that he made that he probably would have liked to have back? Yes. Was he consistent? No, he wasn't. But he acknowledged all that. And interestingly, when he spoke to the media, he talked about last year and how he felt that he wasn't consistent enough when he was healthy out there. So Jones himself, ladies and gentlemen, acknowledged that he didn't play as well as he could have last year. All right. It's not just me saying it or, anybody else just saying it. All right. So that being said, Daniel Jones, did some rollouts. He did some scrambles, stepped into the pocket. I don't think he attempted a single short throw in that, 0 to 9 yard range. I think most of his throws were at least 15 yards down the field. Is that a sign of things to come? Possibly. I do know the Giants offense wants to become more vertical, but, we'll see if that continues or if that was just, what they worked on for today. The play of the day, I think you could give that to Boogie Basham, who off a tip pass, I think it was Jordan Phillips who tipped the pass. It was a Drew Lock pass. And, it's funny. I had said to one of my colleagues, while we're watching practice, I said, boy, Drew Lock is just not getting any height on his pass attempts. He's going to have something knocked down. And I no sooner said that than Jordan Phillips got a hand on it, knocked the ball in the air, and Boogie Basham was in position to come down with the volley and take it back to the house for the pick 6. So that's your play of the game. Don't know who the pass was intended to. We saw a couple of nice deep balls caught by Malik Neighbors. So he's a kid, he also had a drop, by the way. So a little rusty again there, I wouldn't get too worked up either way over plays that were made or weren't made on the first day of training camp practice. So you had that. Chris Manhertz was working a lot with the ones. He was working as a fullback, H-back type out of the backfield. So I found that interesting. So clearly he's the guy who, they're looking at, I think it's going to come down to him and Lawrence Cager for the third tight end spot. Theo Johnson is still on PUP. They say the Giants say that he'll be back probably, sooner than later. So we'll see on that. Let's see. Defensively, one of the first things we all noticed was that Isaiah Simmons did during the individual part of the drills. He spent part of the drills working with the linebackers and then part working with the defensive backs, specifically the safeties. So yes, Isaiah Simmons is going to be asked to do both. And what's kind of interesting with the safeties, Jason Pinnock obviously is penciled in as a starter. And the second safety, is it going to be Tyler Nubin? Is it going to be Dane Belton? Right now, Dane Belton is still running with the ones. Tyler Nubin is mixing in there, but Dane Belton is the main guy. But, you sit and you wonder, is Isaiah Simmons going to cut into that second safety role? There were some plays where you did see that, So I'm curious to see how that progresses as camp goes on. If they, run Isaiah Simmons as that pseudo safety moving forward in passing situations. Let me see. Malik Neighbors, they had him go on an end around. I mean, I thought Malik Neighbors on that particular end around, he took a little too deep of an arc. Sometimes, these guys, they take it and they do this big loop and then before they head up field. And I thought it was a little too deep of an arc, but, I don't know if it was designed that way or just how he ran it, but he did pick up positive yardage. So I guess that's what matters most at the end of the day. Wandale Robinson, I thought, had a good practice, caught some balls, and I'm really excited about Wandale. I really am. I mean, after what that kid went through, to see him, build up his confidence and play with the confidence that he's been playing with, I think he's going to really play a big role in this offense moving forward. Okay. Cordell Flott was cornerback too, as the coaches said would be the case back in the spring. Trey Hawkins and Darnay Holmes, second team. They worked on the second team defense, so we'll see if those guys challenge Cordell Flott for the cornerback 2 position. Let me see. The first touchdown pass, I should say, was Drew Lock to Lawrence Cager. Made a beautiful reception, by the way. So I thought that was really nice to see. And then what else do I have for you? That's pretty much it, I would say, in terms of like highlights and stuff like that. Now, again, a lot of you are like, well, what about the offensive line, defensive line, all that stuff? Got to put the pads on. So, I know there was one play where Dexter Lawrence basically had his way with John Michael Schmitz. But again, to be fair, there's no contact, there's no pads, and the defense benefits. That's not to say that, Dexter Lawrence wouldn't benefit anyway because he is a load to handle, but the defense does tend to benefit until the pads go on. So we'll see if that continues. So that all being said, that's what I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed today's edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. And again, keep it here all week long. If there's a practice, I'll be back with a report. So that means I will see you tomorrow, Giant fans. Have a good one.